Smashing. Well, thank you very much. It's a particularly exciting day to be doing this. I don't know if anyone noticed this morning that the BBC Trust announced it was going to be doing a review of the reporting of statistics in the BBC, which is just a fantastic statement of how important the Trust considers statistics to be. So that's one exciting thing. Another, because we've been spending a lot of time bashing press releases today, I thought I'd add, I got a press release this morning which was perhaps the best written, although the worst directed press release I'd ever had, which was Langoustine, the unsung heroes of shellfish. It's genius. Fantastic. Anyway, so we might do a little bit of press release bashing today, but not too much. So let's just have a few of my favourites. Mobile phone obsession reaches the bedroom as more than 4 in 10 people check their phone before kissing their partner in the morning. This one's fantastic, an email I got. New research, it's always new research. We hardly ever report old research. New research has found that the average UK household spends 12% of their weekly expenditure, while 5.2 million of the lowest earning households are spending around 4% more. That's an increase of 1.3% over the last 3 years. And one of my absolute favourites, it's getting a bit old now, but it turns out a Saturday night in costs hosts up to £118.29 on average. Notice the fabulous use of both the average and up to make a wholly meaningless bit of research just fantastic. And they've gone around, it turns out that this is because people are inviting 4 friends round to watch Strictly with them, and they're buying takeaways for them all, and what are we, 55% of women have even bought a new dress, especially to watch Strictly because the judges are so glamorous, and you know. And then they've sat at their desk and they've phoned up Fortune House Cardiff to find out how much a Chinese set menu for 4 costs. These people are having more fun than we are. Now, I feel I'm preaching to the converted a bit here, because I suspect that we don't have many people here whose job it is to make up stats and try and get them onto news outlets, which is a shame, because I do think the RSS should have a special chapter of that. I don't know if any of you read Dilbert, but he goes to the marketing department and they're all barbecuing unicorns. And I sort of feel like we could have that group who are really just very much enjoying themselves, more than those of us who have to actually try and put something accurate on air are. But the reason why nonsense is getting on the news and the great stuff that you guys are producing isn't, is because they're better at it than you are. And there are a number of reasons they're better at it than you are, but let's start. I know we've got some government statisticians in the house, because I saw most of the ONS press office halfway back. But so what is it about the way that proper stats are coming out that's causing problems? This is tomorrow's diary. So let's all imagine that we're working on a breakfast programme tomorrow morning, let's say breakfast television, and we see on our diary we've got output in the construction industry for April coming out tomorrow, which is, you know, it's a bit bumpy, but it's an interesting series. We've got something about UK trade by industry for Q1, but neither of those come out until 9:30, and you're going off air at 8:30. So that's not much good to you. So let's see what else we've got. We've got the Institute for Chartered Accountants in England and Wales economic forecast for the UK economy. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really care what the Institute for Chartered Accountants in England and Wales think is going to happen to the UK economy. But the thing is, on Tuesday, I got an email from them. And they said, on Friday, we're going to be publishing this. It's going to be out on embargo, and we're going to embargo it to midnight, and we'll probably send it to you the day before anyway. And indeed, first thing this morning, I got my email from the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales telling me what they thought was going to happen to the UK economy, which I can't tell you for another 6.5 hours. But it means that if you're trying to run a breakfast programme and you're going on air at 6 o'clock in the morning, that you've got the figures, you've got the story. They'll probably let you interview the people involved in advance. You can go and do some filming around the place. I think it's something to do with productivity, so you can go and film in a factory and get some pictures and whatever, in a way that you totally can't with a figure that's coming out at 9:30. What else have we got tomorrow? We've got Post Office talking about stamp duty. We've got Lloyds Bank talking about stamp duty as well. And we've got some exciting research. Oh, this is embargoed. I shouldn't be telling you this. 51% of millennials worry about money most of the time. That probably is going to get on breakfast programmes. It's probably nonsense. To be honest, I didn't read far enough in to know whether it's nonsense, but, you know, the spider sense is tingling. This is probably nonsense. But I've already got that research. I've got it in the bag. I can go out and film it. I can get pretty pictures. No one's editor is going to complain if they've got nice pictures, interesting people talking, discussing stuff about the economy. I do, but how can I put this? It's just me, really. So let's have a think about this. We've got our statistical release coming out at 9:30, which means that if it's really big, if it's the biggest release of the month, then it's going to get on the 1 o'clock news. That's, half an hour, actually less than that if you take some off for the weather and, introductions, whatever. It might get onto the 1 o'clock news. If it's the most exciting statistic of the month, then it might get onto the 6 and 10. But it's a very unusual release that's going to get there. And meanwhile, you're missing out these poor people who have been up all night trying to fill 3 hours of programming, who are desperate for this sort of stuff, who are desperate for not just the stats that you're putting out, but for the analysis that you're putting out. And the idea, and I realise that I don't think there's anyone in the room who can do anything about this, but the idea that absolutely everything that comes out of the GSS has to go out at 9:30 is what's stopping it, the proper stuff from the GSS, crowding out the nonsense about who checks their phone before they kiss their partner in the morning. Now, so that's one hand tied behind your back if you're in the GSS, and here's the other hand tied behind your back, which is that the Cabinet Office has now decided that statisticians are not allowed to talk to the media without asking their minister first, which is a bit of a problem, really. Now, I understand it's not a problem for the ONS because, strictly speaking, their minister is Andrew Dilnot, and he's quite happy for you to be talking to the media. But everywhere else in the civil service, you've got your name on at the bottom of the release, so people can phone you up. But if they admit to being a journalist, then you can't talk to them without checking with your minister first, which some might feel was a bit of a problem. And that's the other hand tied behind the back. So I thought, just for today, if you went to the private sector for this, it would cost you thousands, but this is all part of the licence fee. We have media training for people who aren't allowed to speak to the media. And this is to stop you getting into trouble. I phoned up somebody in a government department, which shall remain nameless, because they put out, I can't even remember what the question was I wanted to ask about it, but I phoned up the chap whose name was on the list, and he picked up the phone and he said, "It's my first day, and I don't know anything about the release, and neither does anyone else in the room." Which was terrifically helpful. So, what you need to do, you need to understand the difference between... Am I being crowded out? The difference between the different kinds of questions that you might... See, that's obviously the Cabinet Office. They don't want this to be heard. There are different types of questions that you will get as a statistician in the government department. So, which of these 3 statistics that you produce that have similar names should I be using? And anyone who's looked through anything from the GSS in any detail will know that vast numbers of releases have pretty much the same name, and goodness knows which one I'm supposed to be using. So, I think you're probably pretty safe answering that question. This is people asking for your technical expertise. They're saying, you're not going to end up getting quoted in any newspapers for saying this. On the other hand, do these statistics prove that your minister is a fool? Probably want to push that one over to the press office. I'm desperately trying to find a particular figure on your organisation's shoddy website. Can you help? Bearing in mind that it's a standard rule that all statistical organisations have shoddy websites, you can probably get away with answering that one. What do you think of current government policy? Give that one a miss. So, as long as you can tell the difference between these, then you can explain the technical aspects of your research, and you can help people get things right. But the most important thing, say you're off the record at the start of the conversation, not at the end. Seriously, start the conversation, not the end of it, especially if you're not allowed to talk to the media. And so with this advice, I shall leave it for questions.
Thank you. Tour de force. Right, questions?
Well, perhaps I should respond as we referred to being present here. My name is Mark Fletcher, I'm not a press officer, so perhaps a little bit further. That was very entertaining. Just on the 9:30 point, it's a good one. I would say the coverage of stats, of course, has not been helped recently by the BBC News channel's decision to take a rather more, shall we say, populist programme at 9:30. So we were doing very well until recently, getting our statisticians live about prices and unemployment and so forth. That, I'm afraid, has gone. So everyone here, please note that. We've pleaded with the BBC to get our people back on. Write to your MPs, write to the BBC, take to the streets if you would in an effort to get them back on. But yes, 9:30. It's not one of the great points in the news cycle. We are of course tied by the regulations, which mean we have to release at that time. Nevertheless, as everything with ONS, we're happy to review that. There are discussions going on at the moment, but there's no more sensitive a number than quarterly migration, for example, and don't underestimate the news management that goes on as well. For example,
do you have a question, please?
Okay. Well, I mean, the simple question is, can you prevail upon the powers that be of the BBC to get statisticians on air to speak directly? And we'll do our part, perhaps, to make the release time a bit more convenient as well, and campaign perhaps to get other government statisticians more freedom to operate on social media and in the mainstream media as well.
Well, I mean, clearly it's another good reason not to be releasing this stuff at 9:30, which is, I understand, up for grabs as they bring out the new code of practice. I think the other thing to say is, between ourselves and anybody watching online, not a lot of people are watching the news channel at 9:30. And when we look at the audiences for breakfast programmes, which are many millions of people, these are people that could be captured, by an earlier time. So, yes, it would be lovely to have your fantastic spokespeople back on at 9:30, but it was suggested to me that the reason it comes out at 9:30 is because people are upset that the government gets it in advance and the opposition doesn't, and they don't want to give ministers a free hit on the Today programme. So it suggests that they're deliberately putting it out at a time when no one's watching, which, when you're trying to get a message out, just seems like the wrong thinking.
Sorry, it's me again, Katie Bunce from Moorfields. As part of your nice free media training package, do you have to tell me that you're from the BBC when you phone me up? I have a habit of putting my foot in it. Am I covered by the fact that you didn't tell me you were a press officer, or should I just be more careful?
I do.
Some don't.
Yes, BBC editorial guidelines are terribly strict on all sorts of things. Other journalists who are having more fun than I am don't have to tell you. And, so clearly making this rule about not being allowed to talk to journalists is a huge benefit to people who work for publications that'll let them just phone up and say, hello, I'm Joe Public, and one against those of us who would have to admit to who we are.
And if you had your choice when would you like the ONS statistics to come out? I think in the past we've thought that journalists, since they've worked late the previous evening, probably don't start until 10 o'clock the next morning, but this is obviously an outdated view.
Well, Chris Giles hates me for this, but I'd say 7:30. Every company in the country puts out its results at 7 o'clock in the morning, so you probably don't want to clash with that, but 7:30 allows you a really decent hit across the breakfast programmes.
I would just comment when the practice of statisticians, when they were allowed, this statistician talking to media was allowed, and as an innovation, I was told by a journalist 9:30 was far too early for journalists, and the ministerial press conference, which spun the statistics at 11 o'clock, was far more convenient.
Well, there's no question I'm talking my own book here, but the people, so I will probably be hated by newspaper journalists across the country, but the people who are making breakfast have been up all night anyway, so on broadcast we don't care.
Hi, I'm William Summers. I'm the Press and Public Affairs Manager here at the Royal Statistical Society, and also an occasional usher at events like these. My question is going back to an earlier comment, actually, when David Spiegelhalter was talking about scientists writing press releases. And I was basically interested to know, Anthony, I come from a comms background, we've put a lot of comms people out of business. I just wonder, what do you think about scientists writing press releases and kind of what differences would be from if comms people wrote them?
Well, I'm sure David could do it. I don't know how many other scientists could. Maybe they could. I mean, we have, the big thing is people trying to do, other jobs. We're supposed to have journalists who can do coding. We have reporters who can use cameras. There might be some who can do it well. I'd be surprised if there were many, but Brave New World might happen.
My name's David McGuire. I'm from the King's Fund, a charity. We do a fair bit of qualitative as well as quantitative work. I was just wondering on press releases, how far does anecdotal evidence go alongside statistics in helping get a story noticed?
What gets a press release noticed is it is an art question for press officers. I don't really know. I delete such a lot of them a day, and I'd be lying if I said I could think of why I delete particular ones and not others. Anything about langoustine is fantastic, but my inclination is that you lead on the stats and you can bring in the anecdotal stuff later. But there's no question that there are some outlets that really need that to be able to do the story at all. The media is such a big beast that I think it would be I'd be wrong to declare a general rule on that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.